Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Liz Garrity. I work with COABE. I'm the executive coordinator. It's nice to meet you all today. I'm going to have Shala share her screen. It's our presenter for today. So like I just said, my name is Liz Garrity. I'm the Google Bootcamp project team lead for COABE. I joined adult education from the K-12 field, and I'm enjoying it very much. I work for COABE as an executive coordinator. I joined the team in October of last year, and it's nice to be working with all of you wonderful folks. I've gotten to meet a bunch of you, and it's been a wonderful pleasure so far. And Shala is our presenter today. She is from Google. She's a program manager for Google's Applied Digital Skills program. It's Google's free digital literacy curriculum, online resource of lessons that teaches adults everything from basic digital skills like sending an email and writing a document to more advanced digital skills like project management or personal budget tracking. Applied Digital Skills is a Grow with Google program and is dedicated to bringing digital literacy to everyone. Shala is based in New York City, and she's here to teach us today about support resources, certification, and next steps. So this is actually the 5th webinar. We've done a series of 5, so this is our last webinar. They are all available online in 2 different places. You can go to educateandelevate.org/Google and look at under webinar series, or you can access them at coabe.org under professional resources. And I will definitely reiterate that again throughout. If you have questions today, we ask that you put them in the question and answer section. We have Holly, who is also with us from Google. Hi, Holly. She's also in New York, not New York City. She's outside the city, and she'll be helping field questions while Shala is presenting. I will also be looking for COABE related questions, so we are pretty well staffed to answer all of your questions as they pop up. I know that Shala is planning on stopping after a few sections and asking for questions, and then also we'll have a time at the end. The chat box, if you want to just introduce yourself and say where you're from, we do get going pretty fast over there, so sometimes questions can get lost in the shuffle. So absolutely take advantage of the Q&A section. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shala. Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Really appreciate it. As Liz mentioned, this is our last webinar. It was part of a series of 5 webinars. And so as we move along, if you want to follow along, you can actually go to the Applied Digital Skills website if you're on your computer or phone or tablet. That link is g.co/applieddigitalskills/COABE. So what I really recommend is that you either open another window or another tab and you sort of follow along during our session today. Often I find that, nothing beats hands-on practice. And so these webinars are really intended to supplement the in-person boot camps that we have and that we're scheduling with COABE across all 50 states. And so whether or not you can go to a boot camp in person, highly recommend that you take a look at previous webinars if you haven't seen previous ones, but then also just use this as an opportunity to get your hands a little dirty and follow along with me. So you will see that I am going to be using this presentation, but I'm also going to navigate outside of the presentation onto the website myself. So just to recap a little bit, we've had, this is, as Liz mentioned, the 5th webinar of the series. And we started with a conversation around digital literacy, really focusing in on, what is applied digital skills, why does it focus on digital literacy, and sort of starting that discussion. Digital literacy is so critical to job and life skills. And so when we think about adult education, we really believe that digital literacy is becoming as important as literacy itself. And so we really hope that these are valuable resources that you can leverage with your students and with your colleagues for free. From there, we kind of went through getting started with the lessons themselves. So some of the nuts and bolts as to how you can access these free lessons and some of the different features that you would experience as you went to the website. Then in the 3rd and 4th webinars, we did a little bit of a deep dive into some lesson examples. So as you know, probably from those webinars, we at this point have nearly 70 lessons and over 250 hours of free content that's all been developed in-house by Google's curriculum team. And so these are mostly former educators who have really come together to develop really high quality digital literacy lessons. So we gave some examples of beginner lessons and also some digital skills lessons for the office specifically. But those are really just snippets as to snippets of the much larger curriculum that's available on the website for free. And then today in our final session, we're going to talk about a few different things. One is support, which is after this webinar series and after the boot camps, where can you go when you have a question about the curriculum or how to use it? So we'll go through that at the very end, but we're going to start with something that we just launched actually this year, which is a certification that's associated with the lessons themselves and some next steps that you can take. If you have followed along all of these different webinars, you'll sort of see that there are a lot of different ways you can use the curriculum, and one of the questions we get asked pretty often is, so what do I do? What's the next immediate step that I can take that will enable me to start taking advantage of these lessons and bringing them into the classrooms and into the trainings that I conduct for students? As Liz mentioned, all of these are on the Educate and Elevate website. So again, please join us, ask your questions live, but if you find in 3 or 4 weeks as you're starting to use the curriculum with students, you have some questions, go back to these webinars, refer to them. You see the presentation decks are there, the Q&A is there. So these are really supposed to be long-lasting resources. So I really hope that you go back and you start to use them more than just listening today as well. All right, so jumping right into it, for the next 42 minutes, we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to cover the professional certification, the G Suite certification. Then we're going to talk a little bit about support moving forward and next steps. So the first one is the G Suite certification. So I think a lot of people, both at the COABE National Conference, but really just in conversations that we've been having, have asked for, how can I show that my students learn these skills? Like, what is the thing that I can leave behind and that my students can really obtain after going through and doing some of these applied digital skills lessons? And so we wanted to share and sort of end our webinar series by really doing a deep dive into the G Suite certification. So taking a step back, you probably have never heard of the G Suite certification. And the reason for that is that we just launched it this year. So it's really new. For a very long time, Google never had an entry-level certification. And so after many, many years of hard work, Google Cloud actually launched a G Suite certification. And I'm personally really excited about this certification. I think it's something that we've known we needed for a long time, that our users have asked us for a very long time. And what it really is a professional industry recognized certification that says Shala Naimi, know how to use G Suite apps in the workplace. And we know that G Suite apps focus a lot on collaborating in the cloud, and talk a lot about sort of real-time productivity tools, and really are being used in the workplace at a much higher rate. And for adult education, I think there's an added benefit that, G Suite at the personal level is free. And so, your student who might struggle to have consistent access to a device or even sort of subscription to a productivity app, they can really leverage G Suite, and it'll both automatically save their resume, but it will also always be available to them, whether they are learning in a library or in a classroom or on their phone. So however they're learning, they would be able to have free access to G Suite. So we're just really excited to finally be able to release the certification and share it with all of you. As I mentioned earlier, the certification is focused on assessing someone's ability to use G Suite in the workplace. And the other exciting element of it is it really tests the student on all of the major apps that are used. And so you can see some of the icons here on the lower right-hand corner, but they include Google Drive, Gmail, Google Hangouts, which is our chat function, Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides. And so in a single exam, a student is able to be tested in all 6 of these different applications. And, someone might ask, like, why are we sort of bundling all of these together? And it was really an intentional decision on our end as a team to bring them all together, because often you're not just using one of them in a vacuum. In order to create a resume, for example, you probably would navigate to Google Drive, and from there you would create a new document, and then you would link that document in an email to a potential employer. And so in real life, we know that you're usually using more than one app at a single time. And so we really wanted to make it as applicable to real life as possible. So getting to the nuts and bolts, so what do you need to know about the exam? Well, the exam, as I mentioned, covers all of those 6 apps. It's split into 2 parts. The first part is multiple choice, but even those multiple choice questions are pretty performance-based. And the second part itself is actually fully performance-based. And so what this does is when you sign up to take the exam, it actually sort of prompts you to download a Chrome an extension that you can get from the App Store or the Play Store, that then creates basically a fake environment, stimulates a fake environment that you can use to go ahead and start to perform tasks within a tool. The second sort of piece of information is who can take it. So the exam is available today globally. So anybody who is age 13 and up can take the exam. In some places, i.e. certain European countries, that age is 16 and up, but you can be rest assured that globally for, within the space of adult education, they're legally able to take the exam. The third component is when can you take the exam and where can you take the exam? That's always a really important question. We really explored a lot of different options here, and the most important thing was accessibility. We know a lot of people don't have access to certain locations, and so a very, very important aspect of this was ensuring that anybody who wanted to take the exam could take the exam in a way that was easily accessible to them. So the exam is fully online. And it can be taken at somebody's own time. So that means they can take it at 6 o'clock in the morning. They can take it at 1 a.m., at 2 p.m., whenever they want to take the exam. They just have to schedule that exam when they go to sign up. And all they need is a device and a browser, a Chrome browser, so they can take it remotely at their own leisure. And then in a few select US cities, there are also testing centers run by ProctorU, which proctors the entire exam. So for those individuals who would prefer to travel to a testing center and take it in person on a computer, they can do that as well. But we do expect that with adults, they would primarily prefer to take it online at home or at a different location. So we really recommend that in particular. So because this is a professional exam, we need to take certain privacy and security sort of measures to ensure that nobody cheats, essentially. So the way that the team has structured that is really to have some video, audio, and desktop recording to ensure that, for example, I'm not opening up a new window and checking, trying to look for an answer, or I'm not talking to my friend who's sitting next to me and asking him or her for advice on how to answer a question. And so these measures are really in place so that the exam can meet certain international industry recognized credentialing aspects. And so we really have put those in place for that specific reason. So you'll notice that as you go and take the exam. The second is, the last bit of it is, how long do they have to take the exam? So we wanted to make sure this was as accessible as possible. And so, of course, there are an unlimited number of things that we can test individuals on, but the exam has been structured in such a way that it is a lot more accessible in terms of the amount of time it takes. And so test takers have 2 hours to take the exam. Some might spend the entire 2 hours taking the exam, and we might see that others only need an hour for it, but we've allocated a total of 2 hours to take the exam. And then if somebody passes the exam, what do they get? So what they receive is a digital badge and proof of certified status, which is essentially a certification that they can print or submit to an employer. So you can see an image of that digital badge on the side there, and that's something they can put in their email signature, on LinkedIn, really wherever they are interested in sort of displaying their new credential. So how do you get the certification, the G Suite certification? Well, I will say that the main high-level way that you get the certification is by going to the certification website, which is step number 2, and registering for the certification, taking it, and passing it. Now, we often get questions before that, which is, particularly for all of you who might want to enable your students to get the certification, how can you prepare for the certification? Now, if a student is just a whiz on G Suite and they're really confident in their ability to use G Suite, they might not need preparation. They might be ready to take the exam and get the credential and put it on their resume and hopefully get, a job or a raise or something else out of it. But for those who do need some extra preparation, we have some support resources. The first one is an exam guide. The second is actually 11 ready-to-use lessons from Applied Digital Skills. So now that all of you know how to use Applied Digital Skills, what this really does is dig into how you can use Applied Digital Skills to prepare for the certification. And the third is a practice exam, right? Just to get a little bit of an assessment as to how ready your students actually are. So it's a pretty short practice exam, and we'll go through it in a little bit more detail, but just to get students a little bit comfortable with the format of the exam and the types of questions that are asked. So with that in mind, I'm going to dig into each of those preparation options a little bit more later. But I also want to share a little bit of information about how much the exam costs. So we do work with an external vendor to actually proctor the exam, which means there is a cost associated with it. And because it's a professional certification, generally speaking, the starting cost is $75. And that's the case for the most part across the board for anyone who's an adult professional would pay $75 to take the exam, and they would be prompted to pay that when they sign up for the exam. However, I do know that quite a few people within the COABE network and who might be listening to this webinar also might teach at a technical college, a community college, vocational college, or might be affiliated with some sort of higher education institute. So that institute might be a high school, it might be a college, sort of the whole span of what it might be, we've actually been able to procure a 50% education discount. And that's something that as you go to sign up your students to take the exam, or even if you decide I want to get the G Suite certification, but I'm a teacher, you would be eligible to receive the 50% discount. So you would see that as an option to get more information about how to apply for it and how to how to get access to it when you go to sign up for the exam. So unfortunately, right now, people who don't fall under sort of formal education, whether that's secondary or higher education in any sort, are not currently qualified for academic prices. So some examples of that might be public libraries, nonprofit and for-profit educational institutions. I will say that our teams are looking into providing additional support and maybe extending the education discount to nonprofits in particular, as well as public libraries. So we're looking into that. It's difficult to, from a technical perspective, implement that right now, but if pricing is a barrier for you or for your students, just please keep in mind that you can make the request, and we're sort of exploring the possibilities on our end, but it might take a little bit longer. With that in mind, I wanted to share a bit more information about the certification privacy and security. So the certification does not contain any ads, and it never uses your content or data for any advertisement purposes. If you want a lot more detail about the way that the certification handles privacy and security, there's a link there, and you can get some more information about data protection overall. But there's a list here of the information that is collected and stored, and it's mostly information that just is trying to associate your name or identity with whether or not you passed the certification, so that we can make sure if you did pass it, we send you a digital certificate or a badge. And then it's privacy. We have quite a few privacy protection measures in place because the certification is available to students as young as 13 in the United States. The certification security measures meet those requirements. And so you can, rest assured that whether you're 35 or your students are 14, they would be treated with a very high level of privacy and security. All right, so before I jump into questions, which I will do right after we wrap up this section on the G Suite certification, what I really wanted to do was jump into some of those support resources that I shared earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and exit this presentation briefly, and I'm going to go to the Applied Digital Skills website. There you go. So I have actually already gone to the Applied Digital Skills website, as you can see here. So this is the main Applied Digital Skills website that when you navigate to that link, so let me just go ahead and navigate to that link that I shared earlier, g.co/applied-digital-skills/COABE. Takes me just to this main page right here. And so what I want to do in this case is prepare my students for the G Suite certification. And I want to learn more about what's covered in the certification and how I can sign up. So what I do in this case is I go to the curriculum page, and I will see a section here that's called G Suite Certification Exam Prep. I'm just going to go ahead and click that. Awesome. Now I have a lot of information. I have a description of the G Suite certification, a resume-ready credential that shows employers you can use G Suite in the workplace. And you can prepare for the exam using free lessons from Applied Digital Skills. So again, it's focused on testing your knowledge, showing employers you are workplace ready, with G Suite in particular, and really building a stronger resume overall. There are 3 main steps to certification. The first one is preparing for it, of course. The second is taking the practice exam. And the third is to schedule the exam whenever you feel ready. If once you think your students are ready or you're ready to take the exam, then you can go ahead and actually schedule time to take the exam. So what we have really provided here is we wanted students who were using the Applied Digital Skills curriculum to be prepared to take the exam. So that was really important to us. We wanted to set up every single student for success. And what that really entailed was developing a set of 11 new lessons, which we've done here. that takes students from start to finish in that applied digital skills style. And so to give you an example, we have taken this comprehensive exam guide, which I'm just going to open. Oops, go back for a second. This exam guide. So this is the official exam guide from the G Suite certification team. And what this does is it covers everything, a really detailed look at all of the topics that might be covered in the exam. It's split up by sections such as using Drive, and then a subsection like managing files, such as copying, moving a file to trash, uploading from hard drive, etc. And it goes through this for every single app. So using Drive, using Gmail, etc. So we've matched that specifically so that, you know, let's say your students have no experience using G Suite, or they have very limited experience using G Suite. So your goal is to prep them from zero to, you know, knowledgeable and ready to take the exam. You could go through every single one of these lessons, which range from 35 minutes to 90 minutes, and teach your students, you know, how to use G Suite, using Drive, using Gmail, etc. And the format of these lessons are very similar to, or exactly the same as the format of other applied digital skills lessons. So you go, you press start, and then a series of videos actually walk you through, there you go, the different components of the exam. We also have a number of example projects and logos off to the side here under links and other types of resources. So once you create your class and apply digital skills, you'd be really well prepared to go ahead and start prepping for these lessons. Now, if your students already have some skills, you might decide, you know what, my students all know how to use Gmail really well. They're experts in Gmail. So I really want them just to learn spreadsheets. In that case, you would just go through parts 1 through 3 in spreadsheets with your students. So really, you know your students best, you know what their skill levels are like, so you could go through and use whichever lessons are most applicable to you. You could also assign certain lessons to them, whether or not you want to take the exam. So let's say that you don't want your students to take the exam, or you want them to decide if they want to take the exam themselves. But you do want them to learn how to use Google Slides. You think it's a useful tool, and you want to give them some introductions on how to use it in a video-based way, because it's an easier way for them to learn. If that's the case, you can just go ahead and start assigning these lessons to them to use. That's really up to you. These are really designed for a basic level of G Suite in the workplace, but you don't need to take the exam if you don't want to. It's really up to you. So if you, as an educator, want a more comprehensive guide as to how these lessons match up directly into the exam guide, you can see our comprehensive exam guide. And this really takes every single aspect of the exam guide and it breaks it up. So if we go back to the using Drive right here on the bottom tab, you will see that it has split up every section of the exam by the amount of time it takes to complete it, the skills completed, and the specific lessons that it corresponds to. So if I want my students to learn this specific lesson on managing files, this is what I could do. So you could actually use this as something you print out, or you use as a checklist with your students across a couple of classes. All right. And so that was step 1, which is how do you prepare for the exam? These are the free resources the Applied Digital Skills curriculum has to offer. So when you sign up, you can go ahead and assign those lessons to your students. The second piece is when you're ready, or when your students are ready, you can go ahead and take a practice exam. Now this practice exam is 40 minutes long. It is completely free. And it really goes through an example of multiple choice questions, but also performance-based scenarios. Very similar in structure and format to the actual exam. So if you wanted a little bit of practice, you could go through and follow these instructions to get a sense of, am I actually ready for this exam, or am I not ready for this exam? So you can go ahead and use this free tool to your advantage as sort of a gauge as to whether or not your students are ready for the exam. Awesome. And then when you're ready for it, You can go back to the Applied Digital Skills page. Again, you sort of see all of the lessons that you can use to prep. You have the practice exam, and then you can go ahead and start scheduling the exam to take. So there's one very important distinction here, which is that the way that minors, so those who primarily are in secondary school, right? So they might be in middle school, they might be in high school. The way they take the exam is different than the way that adults take the exam. Now, I mentioned earlier that adults can take the exam remotely online from the comfort of their own homes, or they can take it at a testing center in some select cities in the United States. Now, students who are in middle or high school, they are only permitted to take the exam at school, facilitated by a school official. And the reason for that is that, as I mentioned earlier, an adult taking the exam remotely online at home, their screen is recorded to ensure that they are not cheating. That is not the case for minors. In that case, the school official, like a teacher or an administrator, is actually verifying that they are not cheating, and they take on that responsibility themselves so that there's no recording of any student desktops or any other type of recording. And so I just wanted to call that out specifically because it is a different way of taking the exam. That being said, the actual exam format and content is exactly the same. So it doesn't matter how old the test taker is, they are coming out with the same credential, and they are taking the exact same. So for adult education, for adult test takers in particular, when they are ready to take the exam, they just go to the Google Cloud certification page, which is right here. It provides a nice overview of what the exam is, which I've shared. And then it has a button here to register to take the exam. So they just go ahead and click that button. Just gonna let it load. There. And then they can sign up with a new user account or sign in if they worked with this specific ProctorU exam before. And they can just go through and sign up to take the exam whenever they are ready. So a pretty simple process to actually go ahead and take the exam there. All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to go back to my presentation. So as I mentioned, if you want to prepare your students for the exam, you just go to the Applied Digital Skills website. You go to the curriculum page and check out the exam prep subpage, and that will show you that you can prepare with a few different resources like the practice exam and exam guide and the 11 lessons on essentially how to use G Suite in the workplace that prepare those students for those exams, and follow the exam guide very closely. And then whenever you're ready for it, your students could go ahead and schedule time to take the exam. And then there are additional resources for you as educators if you want to get into the details as to how the lessons prepare students for different aspects of the exam. You can take a look at the comprehensive exam guide. And you can also take the practice exam just to get a sense of, are my students ready for it? Are they not quite ready for it? So really a nice gauge to get a sense of whether or not that, $75 investment or $37 investment should be made. There are 11 lessons from Applied Digital Skills. Again, they can be used to prepare for the G Suite certification, but they might also just be nice introductions on how to use Drive or how to use Google Sheets. So they might be really great free resources for you to use with your students regardless. Awesome. I'm going to stop there for just like one or two questions that have come up in the meantime. So Holly, if there's anything that's come up, you can go ahead and share. Otherwise, I can continue. And I'll stop sharing my screen for a sec, or I'll keep my screen off then.
We have a few questions that came up. Some people had some questions about how an agency becomes a testing site, and how you can find that kind of thing, and I guess for the sites in general, like schools or buildings in general.
Yeah, that is a great question. So what I'm going to do is actually show you how to do that. So the way you do that is you go to the website of the of our vendor who actually proctors the exam for us, and that is ProctorU. So you can find their website at proctoru.com. And then you can go ahead and just go to their help center and click around their website. And basically, when you become a ProctorU testing center, then you're able to become a facilitator of the exam yourself. So let me see. I haven't done this before, so I hope you will be patient with me. But let me go ahead and see if I can figure out how to do that. So I went to their help center. And it looks like there's some ways here that I can use to contact ProctorU. So there you go. I can go ahead and submit a request here to contact them, and they will get back to me on how to do that. So what I really recommend is that you become a ProctorU testing center, and that will enable you to go ahead and administer the G Suite certification exam.
Great. Okay, so another question was, how have you collaborated with workplaces to make the certification relevant and recognized?
Awesome. So the main ways, oops, just did something weird with my screen. So the main way that we've worked with workplaces or employers is really just to get their buy-in in terms of understanding what's necessary for the workplace. So there's sort of two components to that. The first one is understanding where and how the G Suite is being used at all. So to give you an example, here at Google, we almost exclusively use G Suite. I used Google Slides to create this presentation. Other people use other apps to use spreadsheets for their budgets, for their quarterly reports. And so we did that with quite a few employers who use G Suite, big and small, to get an understanding of what do they see are those key productivity skills, those key collaboration skills that they use G Suite for. So an example of that might be, commenting on your colleague's document to give them feedback. And by doing that, we actually went ahead, and that's essentially, one of the key ways that we created the exam content is really through employer discussion and demand. The second way we achieved that was really maintaining the professionalization of the exam. So by aligning the exam to ISO standards, it was really a key element of understanding that the security of the exam is strong enough and high enough that employers will respect it. And so between the two of those were sort of like the main things that were done to ensure employer buy-in. Cool. So actually, we might have time for one more question, if there's another one about the G Suite certification. We'll come back at the very end, too, for additional questions about anything, really.
Sure. I had a couple of questions about what the difference was between the G Suite certification and the being a Google Educator.
Oh, yeah. So that is a great question. So what I'm going to do is actually go to the Google Educator website. So let me just go ahead and do that. Here you go. I have it queued up. So that's a really good question. So the question was, what do these exams on the Google for Education Teacher Center, how are these different than the G Suite certification? So if you go to the Teacher Center, which the person who has asked this question probably has, you will see the Certified Educator Level 1 and Level 2 exams. So there's sort of two elements here that I will emphasize, or three elements really. The first one is the educator exams are specifically designed to teach, or really specifically designed for the K through 12 space. So they're not necessarily designed for higher ed or for adult education. They're really focused on that K through 12 space. The second thing I will mention is that the certified educator exams, what they do is they prepare you as an educator to use and to leverage Google tools for the classroom. And so the way that, for example, I'm going to go ahead to the fundamentals training here for it. Oops. I'm just going to show you all my email addresses. So it shows you, for example, increasing efficiency in the classroom, engaging in professional growth and leadership, and a bunch of other ways that you specifically as an educator can bring Google tools into your classroom. So let's say you're pretty new to Google and you want to start bringing Google tools into your classrooms with your students, the Google Certified Educator Level 1 and Level 2 exams and trainings would probably be pretty relevant and helpful for you because your goal is to bring Google into your classroom programming. Now, the difference is that the G Suite certification is an exam for the enterprise space. It is not about how can I use G Suite or how can I use Google tools in my classroom. It's how can I use those Google tools and G Suite in the workplace. So it is really great for your students who are looking for a new job or looking for a better job. Because it's not educator specific or education specific. It is very focused on the enterprise space. And the last thing I'll mention is the G Suite certification is very heavily focused on that professional aspect of it. So the increased security measures are really around ensuring that it is ISO compliant and thus sort of employer and industry recognized. As opposed to the certified educator exams, which sort of have a slightly lower bar of security there. All right, cool. So we're going to come back to this down the line as well, but I just want to go ahead and make sure that we talk about a couple of other things. The first one is how can you get support moving forward? What are the support resources available to you after this webinar? So there's a lot. And they're mostly online in addition to the boot camps. So the first one is something actually that we're going to be launching in a few weeks. And so you will not see it on the website today, but if you go in a few weeks, you will see it. And what that is really a help center that takes the most frequently asked questions and sort of community-oriented questions, and it provides tips and tricks and sort of our replies to a number of questions. So,
Bella, can I interrupt for 1 second? Your audio is breaking up a little bit.
All right. Is that any better?
It sounds like there's some static.
Let me stop sharing my screen for a second, maybe, and try again.
Sorry, everyone. Just let's be patient for one moment.
How is that? Is that any better?
A little bit better. Let's give it a go for another minute, and I'll jump in again if it doesn't improve. Oh, no, she's frozen. Oh, no. Stay tuned, folks. Shala, you are frozen if you can hear me. She may have to sign off and sign back in. Holly, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I just was trying to unmute.
Oh, that's okay. Let's see. Now Shala's not frozen anymore. Let's see if we can hear her.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry, everyone. Thank you for being patient with us.
Yeah, thank you. There's always a joke around tech companies having the most trouble with tech. So I feel like that was a good example of that. Anyways, as I was saying, so yeah, we're going to be in a few weeks launching this help center with a lot of frequently asked questions, some of the troubleshooting questions that have come up before. So just be on the lookout for that. You will be able to find it on the website by just scrolling down to the help button. The second one is if you go to the Applied Digital Skills website today and you click for teachers, which is all of you, you will be able to see a number of resources that are available to you, including getting started kits and examples, of how to use the Applied Digital Skills curriculum. So we have examples of how other people have used it and some of the resources that they have used. So we have put in some effort to actually share those awesome examples out with all of you. And the last one I will mention, which I don't have a slide for here, is obviously COABE and the boot camps. So if you have not already signed up for your boot camp, please do. You can find all of that information on educateandelevate.org/Google. So you'll see a full list of boot camps, and you can start to actually register for it. And those are, free for you to attend, and they're really great hands-on training so you can get started with the curriculum. And in terms of next steps, all right, so we have had 5 hours of webinars training. We have some support resources, both in person but also online, that are available to you. So the question, is what do I do with all of this information? What's the next step that you should be taking? So as you know, Applied Digital Skills is really a free digital literacy curriculum that we have created at Google in-house, and it is focused on providing learners of all ages for the growing number of jobs that require basic digital skills. So we know that digital literacy is critical to get a job and to move ahead in your job. And so we have provided these resources for you to share with your students for free. And we wanted to make sure it was as helpful and applicable as possible. And so we did not want to teach digital skills in a vacuum, but we really wanted to couple it with practical life skills, so that someone is learning how to budget or plan an event using a spreadsheet, or how to format a document while also practicing group decision-making and collaboration. So it really shows adults how to use different Google applications or G Suite applications in an applied setting. So it is very heavily project-based. To use Applied Digital Skills, there are some things that are necessary. That includes internet access, some basic digital skills, essentially the ability to navigate to the website. So some basic keyboarding skills, and the ability to sort of navigate with a mouse or your mouse pad. It also requires some sort of device. Generally speaking, we recommend a laptop or a desktop device. It is available on tablets and on mobile, but as you can imagine, it's fairly difficult to create an entire budget or resume on a mobile device, but it is absolutely possible. We've seen it done before. So while we recommend a laptop or desktop device, mobile or tablet devices would also be possible to use. The other is a Google account. So that, again, it uses G Suite. So what they do is, you create a class and your students join that class. And this is all done through the Google account system. And the other two are actually both recommended, but not necessary. The first one is headphones. Obviously, if you are teaching more than 5 students in a classroom, Applied Digital Skills, and each one of them is working at a different pace on a different lesson. It can get kind of loud quickly, so we sometimes recommend that there are some headphones present. And the last one is some basic English or French, and possibly very, very, very soon, Spanish language comprehension. We design and write our curriculum at the lowest sort of language level possible, and the second webinar sort of goes through this in more detail, but there is some basic language comprehension required. We also have an adult education guide that we will share out on the COABE website as well, and that guide gives you as an educator sort of a guide that you can use to figure out what to do next. And so that includes exploring the curriculum, planning how are you going to use it with some sample learning paths that you might consider. How do you actually create that class, and how do you implement and grow the impact that you're having around digital literacy with your students. And so it is a very comprehensive guide. You do not need to read it if you already feel like you have a good sense of what Applied Digital Skills is and how you want to use it, but it is a resource that is available to you and to your colleagues if you would like to use it. So what you can do next is, as I mentioned, you can go ahead and register for your next COABE Run Applied Digital Skills training at the Educate and Elevate website. You can read through the Apply Digital Skills website, the Help Center, the Adult Education Guide if you would like to. Again, all of these are optional. And then third, which is really sort of, I think the big next step is just to get started. Digital literacy can be really scary sometimes, and we do hope that providing a free curriculum and providing curriculum that is video-based makes it a little bit less scary. But what I really recommend is you pick one lesson and you use it yourself as a student, or you start to use it with your students and register them and just sort of get moving. Take a look at our beginner lessons that we shared in the third webinar and pick one of those and spend 45 minutes experimenting and really bringing digital literacy and G Suite into your classrooms. Awesome. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can always also go to the Apply Digital Skills website, and you can contact us anytime using this email address, applieddigitalskills@google.com. Several of you have contacted us over the last few weeks that we started these webinars and have asked us some really great questions. So feel free to reach out anytime, and we do our best to answer that within a day or two. And with that in mind, we have 10 extra minutes. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that you can see my face and I can answer any other questions that are available.
Hi, Shala. So there's lots of questions about other certifications available for educators. Specifically, some people had some questions about the Google Educator for adult education, for adult instructors. So if you had any other thoughts about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that does not exist. And as far as I know, that there are not plans to make that. So there's nothing along those lines that exist. I think that the G Suite certification would probably be the most relevant, but I'm not entirely sure. So unfortunately, an educator-specific exam for adult educators does not currently exist.
Okay, let me find another question. A bunch popped up at the end. So some of the links that you talked about, the Adult Education Guide, for example, are you going to be sharing that?
Yes, so we can put the Adult Education Guide, this webinar, of course, with the deck. And this presentation has quite a few links inside of it as well. And so while you can access all of those on the Applied Digital Skills website, sometimes I think it's helpful just to have them directly. So we'll make sure that those links are all shared in the description of the webinar as well. So Liz is our guru behind that with her web team. So we will get those to her in the next hour, and you should see those up within a day or two.
Let's see. Does the certification expire was another question that came up.
Oh, that is a great question, which I completely failed to answer, and I should have shared earlier. Yes, so the certification is valid for 2 years, and then at that point, somebody could retake it. So I believe it's valid for 2 years.
Let's see, what else do we have? I think a lot of the questions were similar, so let's see.
Awesome. I'm just also going through the chat. Awesome, yeah, it looks like.
Oh, here's another one. How would an adult education facility provide the exam at no cost to students? That is pay for the exam on their behalf.
It is, yes, so that's a great question. So it depends on how they're structured, which is a difficult question because I know it changes state to state and facility to facility. So if an adult education institution is structured within the Department of Education, so let's say it's within either the higher ed or K through 12 system, they would get it for 50% off. And if they required or needed further subsidy, when they actually go to sign up for the exam, there's sort of a top line banner there that says, do you need academic pricing? Fill out this form. So they would go ahead and manually fill out that form, and then somebody from the certification team will follow up with additional information about fully free vouchers is what we call them. So it's sort of an important term to understand. They would just explain their situation, and they would get the information from that certification team directly. The other way is we are looking at discounts for nonprofits and other types of institutions that might not fall into that category. So public libraries come to mind and nonprofits come to mind. Right now, we're just looking at extending the discount to them. We're not necessarily looking at sort of providing fully free vouchers, but again, the certification just launched not too long ago. So I would just keep your ears to the ground. If that changes in the future, you can sign up on the Applied Digital Skills website for just more information generally, and we'll be sure to keep sharing that information if it changes in the future. But I understand that it's not free is better, but unfortunately in this case, it's not fully the case. No.
One question that just came in, have you worked with any correctional facilities?
That is a great question. For the certification exam?
Yes, that's what I'm assuming.
No, so we have not, as far as I know, worked with any correctional facilities for the certification exam. That's a great recommendation, though. I think it's something we can definitely consider through COABE's sort of branch that's focused on correctional facilities, but currently we have not. Maybe for some context, the certification actually just launched this year, so a lot of the kind of outreach we'll be doing is pretty new, and so we do hope to, again, make it as accessible as possible, but it will take some time, I think. With correctional facilities, the first thing will really be to just provide them free training as a starting point, and then to sort of take each small step from there, because there are quite a few technical hurdles. For anyone who's worked in correctional facilities knows quite a few technical hurdles that will make it just a little more challenging to get some of these resources into the correctional facilities. But if you want to help and you have ideas, please email us at applieddigitalskills@google.com, and we would love to be able to support that audience more. All right, cool. So with that in mind, if you have any other questions, please do email us or reach out. But I will say a huge thank you to Holly for fielding your questions while I was presenting, and thank you to all of you for being patient with me as my audio cut out, and I will now mute and defer to Liz.
Thank you. I actually just saw one last question pop up. Would you do boot camps for corrections? I know that there is the CEA conference in Detroit is hosting a boot camp, and our very own Tara Reestack is going to be the one facilitating that. There is more information online at www.educateandelevate.org/Google, and then there's a boot camp schedule. It'll come up with a map of your state, and all the details are listed. I think we have to maybe talk a little bit more about doing boot camps in other venues. Right now, we're kind of starting at state conferences. So more to come, so stay tuned. I know everyone's really excited, which is great, and we've had a lot of interest and excitement around the boot camps, and I myself actually just got back from Missouri last week from hosting one, and it was a great experience. So I encourage you to definitely go on and register, see if your state is signed up. We do not have all 50 states yet, we're getting there, but go ahead and see if your state is there and register if you can. And remember to submit those success stories. We're drawing a winner every month. We just picked our June winner, Michelle, and on July 1st, you'll get to read her success story in the membership update, and we'll send out an e-blast as well. It's a great story, and Shala actually met her this week, and so it's really great. You get $1,000 for just taking a few moments to let us know how this skills curriculum, this applied digital skills curriculum, is impacting adult learners in your community. So I just want to make sure that we really promote getting those stories into us. And you can also do that at the educateandelevate.org/Google. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Shala. Thank you, Holly. And we'll see you guys all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.